Hello and welcome to Kitty Talks. We share inspirational life stories that empower you to create yours. And today I have with me probably actually one of my best friends on the whole planet, Runa Magnus. Welcome again to Kitty Talks.
Woo-hoo-hoo. Thank you.
And did you know that you are one of my best friends on the whole planet?
Oh, I just found out.
There you go. You learn something every day.
Exactly.
Runa has been on the podcast. For those of you who've listened to the podcast for quite a while now, you know that Runa has very kindly come on and shared her story in the past. This time she's going to be supporting me in sharing my journey. A few of you have been writing in to ask me around my life story and how I've ended up setting up Kitty Talks and what inspired me. So I didn't really just want to talk by myself. So I roped Runa in to ask me questions. So Runa, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Kitty, for being so open to share your story to the world, because I think your story is very inspirational, very transformational, and absolutely needs to be out there so that your listeners can really feel to the core why you're doing what you're doing. Not that you don't really show that in every single episode that you bring out there, but nevertheless, the world needs your story.
Well, why not? I think we all have a story, actually. I totally believe that we've all got a gift that we can bring to the world and we all have a story. So,
yeah. So I'm going to take over.
Okay. I'll be good.
Take over. Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to start with my question. Who is Kitty Waters and why? How did this whole thing start for you?
Wow. That's a very, very big open question. So in true Kitty Talk style, what I'm going to do is go back a little bit into my journey, right? Start from not from right from the beginning, but sort of let people into the poignant moments of my life. Probably the best place to go back to was my 20s, because my 20s were turbulent, yet fun. At the age of 22, I found myself working in the city of London. For those of you who are in Iceland or overseas, the city is kind of the banking area of England, and it's known for champagne Charlies, and a lot of money basically is earned in the city. And at the age of 22, I was earning six figures. I'd kind of just complete synchronicity, and I believe that I was supposed to be doing the job in the city because of how I got it. It just flowed. Somebody introduced me to somebody else, and I found myself with this job. But at the age of 22, I was earning very, very good money, but I was working in a very male-dominated environment. And I was one of the boys. I was like working very hard, kind of the second highest biller in this recruitment company, and earning really good money, but feeling very out of alignment with myself. Not that I really realized it then. And my 20s essentially were me feeling depressed, me feeling disconnected. Outwardly, I looked to the world like I was enjoying myself because I was earning good money, but inwardly I was in my masculine. I was using drugs and alcohol to cope with that feeling of disconnection. And I now realize that I was kind of looking for the divine in the wrong places. And how that kind of culminated for me was I actually had a nervous breakdown at 23. I totally kind of had feelings for somebody I worked for, and that person was married, and that in my head was wrong. And of course had very black and white thinking around that, and I internalized all the emotion and I had a nervous breakdown. But I didn't really learn my lessons. I wasn't feeling my emotions. I was still blocking my emotions, and you know, it's been a journey for me from my head to my heart to start to feel my emotions. And then I had a spiritual awakening at the age of 28. I had been suffering with depression probably for about 8 years at that point. Didn't really understand what was going on. And at 28, my mum was also diagnosed with quite bad depression. She had got the menopause, and it had triggered something in her. And one day at work, I got a phone call at work from my dad to say that my mum had gone missing and that they were worried about her and could I come home. And I remember saying to my dad, well, what do you mean she's gone missing? She's really depressed. You shouldn't have let her out of the house by herself. And he had kind of stayed where he was just in case she was going to come back, but she hadn't appeared. So he asked if I could then come home. My boyfriend at the time was a paramedic, and I don't believe that was by chance. You know, he had his day off as well, which was pretty rare. And I remember saying, right, Dan, we need to go. And then the kind of look of, oh, I'm exhausted. Do I have to? And then, of course, you know, of course he did, because it was my mum. So we picked up my sister, and we got to my house in Kingston, and there was a policeman in my living room. And the policeman asked me he was clutching a suicide note, and he asked me if my mum had ever tried to do anything like that before. And I said no. And my dad said, well, yes, she has actually. And I then learned at that point at 28 that she'd tried to commit suicide twice when we were younger. And I never knew that. And it was kind of like my world came crashing down on me at that moment. It was like being in a film. Everything kind of collapsed. And what I knew was the truth wasn't the truth anymore. And but at that stage, I'd been suffering silently, not telling anybody that I was suffering with depression for 8 years. And then to learn that my mum was suffering in that moment was kind of catastrophic and kind of a bizarre feeling. It was relief, but at the same time, it was, you know, kind of felt very out of sorts. So didn't really have a chance to think about it, because obviously the primary goal of being there was to find my mum. So we disappeared off to find her, and at the back of the house where we live is a big expanse of woods, and at the back of those woods you can turn left or you can turn right. And I remember my sister saying to me, well, where do we go? What do we do? Where do we go? And then suddenly this voice in my head basically said, turn right. And my sister said, how do you know we turn right? And the voice said, turn right. And I said, I don't know. I'm just being told to turn right. And for those of you listening, I don't know how many of you have had these kind of spiritual awakening experiences, but it was like, okay, I don't really know what's going on, but I'm going to follow the voice. And that's what we did. We followed the voice, and we found my mum. She had overdosed and she had slumped by the side of the river. But luckily for her, she hadn't fallen into the river, because she would have died. And then from there, Dan, my boyfriend, did a sternum rub. I went to get the ambulance. And luckily for us, you know, she recovered. And I'd like to say up until this day, she has been fine. She has been fine, actually. At the moment, she's not so good. But that really woke me up, that experience, because obviously there was obviously something more to life than I could see. And I'd always felt it, but I'd never really experienced it. And that voice basically was a real catalyst for me to go down a big spiritual and personal development rabbit hole. And so that's what I did. I spent the next, I was 28. Well, do you know what? Ever since 28, really, I have been down a spiritual rabbit hole. I still think I'm in the spiritual rabbit hole.
And you say that was the awakening for you. Did we're looking back, do you see that it immediately happened for you, that you started the spiritual journey, or did it take you some time to digest what has just happened and what you needed to do? I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, was this a conscious choice to move on that journey and exploring that further, or did it just happen?
At the time, I was using drugs and alcohol. I was overweight. I was depressed. I was unhappy, and I didn't like my life. And I remember running for the ambulance saying, I know I'm not supposed to be living this way, but God, if there's a God up there, and I think there is a God now, because I've just had someone talk to me that I've never experienced in my life. You know, I promise I'll change my ways, and I know I'll live differently, and I'll make a difference. And that was the conversation that I actually had. in my head as I was running. And I've interviewed obviously 80 people now, and not everybody, but a few of them have got similar kind of experiences where they were kind of going through something quite big, and they reached out, and something happened. And it took me quite a long time. Because I had to unpick my life. Like, I was in a very toxic lifestyle. So, I surrounded myself with people who drank and took drugs, and anybody else who's listening, that becomes the norm. It's when you do that, day in, not day in, day out, but it was kind of every weekend. Your whole environment is shaped around that. And so you have to unpick yourself out of it.
Yeah. I mean, just the vibration of people who are in that states in their lives is not exactly a high vibrational people.
No, and it's not easy to get yourself out of that. If that's where you're getting your love and connection from, and your friends are all doing it, it's very difficult to stop doing it, because it's how you get accepted as a human being. And as human beings, we don't like to stand out. We like to fit in. And so it took me probably till 28 to 32, 33. And I'd have relapses. Like, I'd do quite well, and then I'd relapse back into it because I'd feel lonely. Or, and I actually now understand that, but at the time it's unconscious. You might, end up just going out and getting off your head because you were lonely. But I think the thing that started to shift for me was when I made friends outside of my workplace. So I joined something called the Yes Group, which those of you in England will have probably heard of. It's an entrepreneurial group. And threw myself into it wholeheartedly, and became the speaker liaison for booking speakers to come to the organisation. And this is kind of what I preach now. I got so excited about it, and I just loved doing it. And of course, I started to do more of it. And they also organised a trip to Kilimanjaro, and I thought, fantastic. I can't be living the way I'm living and climbing a mountain. I've got to be serious, and I've got to take it seriously. So I need to start doing that. And I think the thing that started to shift for me was I started to do things that I enjoyed. That I started to, move away from doing what I felt I should be doing, and moving towards things that I really started to enjoy. So we climbed Kilimanjaro, and the chap who took us up Kilimanjaro was a member of an organisation called the Transformational Leadership Council in America. People may or may not have heard of it. Its claim to fame is that it had the 24 teachers in the secret were members of the Transformational Leadership Council. And he told us every night stories about this organisation, and it just sounded amazing. By this stage, I'd been reading Self-Help Queen. I'd read every book under the sun. And all the people of books I'd read were members of this organisation, the Jack Canfields, the Sonia Chiquettes, the Michael Beckwiths, the Stephen Coveys. And it was like literally a little light bulb went on in my head, or I think in my soul. And I just thought, that is what we need in Europe. Why do we not have that in Europe? I want to bring that to Europe. And at the time, I was standing on top of a mountain, so I was like, "This is the altitude." But no, it really excited me to the point of I thought about it all the time. I dreamt about it. I wrote about it. And when I got down off the mountain, I wrote a business plan, and I told everybody that I could get my hands on that this is what I was going to do. And when I look back on it, I realised it. It sounds bonkers. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but what I realised I was doing was I was going after something that truly, truly excited me. And that excitement is totally electric, and it raises our vibration. And this is what I obviously preach now, is people to follow their highest excitement. And so when I got down off the mountain, Runa's heard this story probably about 1 million times, but got down off the mountain, I wrote the business plan, and then I spoke to everybody I knew. And then this lady that I'd met 9 months previously through the Yes Group, a lady called Marsha Martin, who is now my partner in the Network for Transformational Leaders, contacted me and said a friend of hers was moving to Europe, and would I like to help this friend of hers set up the Network for Transformational Leaders in Europe? It was called ATL back then. And I just couldn't believe it, because obviously it was the weirdest and wonderfulest synchronicity. But what I think, when I look back at it now, I was following my highest excitement. I was doing a lot of work around unblocking my negative beliefs. Like at the time I was studying to do my NLP qualifications. And I remember letting something go the day before, big parts integration. And the following day, I got the call about the network. And I truly believe when we do this work, when we let go of negative beliefs and conditioning, we create more space and we have more energy. And when we focus that energy and attention on the things that excite us, that's when we get into alignment with our soul and our soul path, and we do our Dharma. You got me ranting now.
No, yeah. Now I'm going. I'm seeing the whole thing. I'm seeing all the little milestones that have taken you to the place that you're at today. But I want to know more. Tell us more about that. What happened? You started the network, the Transformational Leaders.
Yes, and Runa, you were at that first meeting in Windsor.
I know.
That's how we met.
And I'm reflecting on that journey and what I think I can speak for everyone that at least I know well in that group. It was the biggest transformation that any of us had experienced before. It totally turned our lives around. And to me, it feels like you've always been my family. It's like a soul family, a group of soul family. And the other day, you know how Facebook comes up with, you've been friends for X many years or whatever. And one of my really dearest friends and one of the change makers today, it came up that we've been friends for 4 years. And I said, Facebook is lying.
Yes, it's all my life. Was that not is that Nick?
You've been, yeah.
It feels like longer than that.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, it can't be. I mean, I known you all my life and probably previous lives as well. So, yeah. So Facebook is lying.
It was actually 6 years. It was 6 years ago that it started.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because at that event, I didn't know you so well then, but I remember the end of the last event. We were sat listening to Julia Hauserman, and she was talking about an organization that she wanted to set up, and she had the most amazing music. And I had another out of body experience in that room. I think it was the culmination of, I made it sound very short, but that, from climbing the mountain was the January, and then the following September, I think that's right. I think it's was it the following year? Yeah. So it's like a year in between. So from first having the idea to it coming to fruition. But the end of the first meeting of the Network for Transformational Leaders, I had this kind of another out-of-body experience where I literally melted into the universe and became one with the universe, and I could feel the energy of the universe rushing through my body. And it was almost like a huge confirmation of what I was supposed to be doing. I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. And I remember running, because at that stage I wouldn't have been comfortable expressing my emotions in front of people I didn't know. So I remember running out of the room and just completely collapsing into a complete state of... But I think, in my experience, when we're on the right path, we do get these, maybe not voices in your head all the time, but we do get the synchronicities. We do get the connections coming in. And so I'll just go on to the next stage, because I think it's relevant in what we're talking about. But when I was working at the time, I was working in a job at the time, and I was really unsatisfied, and I wanted to set up the Network for Transformational Leaders. And I knew that I needed to do it, and I knew I wanted to do it. And I went and talked to my boss and sort of said, this is what I want to do. And I walked out of the meeting with my boss with a 3-day-a-week job. And that gave me 2 days a week to actually set up what it was I loved. So I think our job sometimes is, when we have this idea of the things that we really want to do, our job is not to question how it's going to happen. Our job is just to do it. And in my experience, when we put one step in front of the other, one foot in front of the other, the next piece of the puzzle becomes clear. And you don't necessarily know the end of the journey and where you're going, but you do, as you go on the journey, the pieces of the puzzle are revealed to us.
So it's really what you're saying is, it sounds like really being present.
Being present and having faith and trusting and, following what lights you up. And I've learned this lesson the wrong way. So the organization was running, but my work life was not in the same field. I was still in the HR industry, and I was running a business with my then partner. And deep down, I didn't really want to be doing it. I didn't want to let her down. I didn't want to leave because I didn't really want to let her down. But at the same time, I kind of had this now calling that I wanted to be in the coaching world, in the transformation space. And I ignored it and I pushed it down. And I carried on working, and I thought maybe I could do both. So I was doing a little bit of this on the side, doing a little bit of that on the side. And the nagging voice kept on going, and I just kept on ignoring it. And I think this is the other thing that I'd like people listening to think about is you can't ignore your soul's calling. You can ignore it for so long, but it will catch up with you. And how it caught up with me was the business partnership split very nastily and very messily. And it was painful. There was lawyers involved. It was expensive. I lost a friend out of it. But I was too scared at the time to say that I just didn't want to let her down. So I was too scared to kind of back out of it. And I think the universe will correct us when we are going the wrong way. And I was going the wrong way. I was ignoring my inner voice. And so it corrected me, and it corrected me in a messy way. But again, these things, hindsight, you see how they affect you. And actually, in hindsight, this is probably the best thing that ever happened to me. Because shortly after that, my soul started to talk to me again and say, right, you need to set up the podcast. Dun, dun, dun.
And when you're, because this is so interesting, because what I'm hearing is both your soul is basically telling you, leave that job, go leave that situation. And really, but you go, no. It's safe to have both and all of those excuses, so that you are in that box, as I would say, that box of, I have to do this, I have to do that. I mean, it's just you that are
society.
And then you start to listen. There's something that happens. So you start to listen to that voice that says, start the podcast. Was it like, this is my way. Now I see how I can actually do things and go into the transformational world? Or
I would encourage anybody listening to this who maybe feels the same is to give yourself space. And that's what I did. So it's very difficult when we're on the treadmill of life. You're going to a job, or you're doing this, or you're constantly going. You can't get clear. You can't align. You can't get space. And so I think that's why the business totally needed to leave and go. And after that, my husband and I went on holiday, and we were in Ibiza, and we just didn't do anything. We just got a villa in Ibiza, and we read books, and we traveled around the island. And slowly but surely, this idea started to creep in. And a podcast excited me because, by this stage, I'd built a very good network of transformational leaders through the work I'd been doing with a nonprofit. And I just thought I could really see myself interviewing thought leaders. And I love listening to people's life stories because I think they're fascinating. Because I believe we all have a gift we can give to the world. And actually now, obviously this is 80 people in, there is a clear thread, of people's life experience. And so I just thought that's what I'm going to do. I don't know where it's going to go, but that was the kind of calling I got. And that's how it started. I got back, started to put one foot in front of the other and started to interview people. And then we launched the podcast. It was May 2017. Yeah. And obviously now we've been going for over, not even a year yet. It's just under a year still, but 80 people in.
But very successful podcast and loads of the episodes that I've listened to, I think I haven't probably listened to everyone, but I've listened to quite a few, and they are very insightful. And the stories, I'm like, I agree with you. Listeners, probably when they listen to your podcast, they can resonate with many of those stories.
The idea,
our stories are similar.
Yeah. Well, the idea was by listening to somebody else's life story, that you see your own. And actually, you are empowered by that, because I wanted to interview thought leaders who are doing amazing things to show the transition. How on earth does Alexei Panos or Preston Smiles get into doing what they're doing? You know, what is their transition? What is their journey? What did they do? How did it come about? Because if you hear that and it becomes available for you. So I'm hoping that, you know, people listening after they listen to the interviews, that they feel inspired, because this isn't just, everybody has something they can do and bring. And what happened for me about 3 months in is the soul started to talk to me again and say, you need to create a how to find and follow your purpose course. And that well, by this stage, you know, the people I was interviewing were really driven by their purposes, you know, and we know that when you have a real meaning and purpose to your life, you live longer, you're happier, you're healthier. But the purpose conversation is scary for people, because we don't wake up one day and know why we're on this earth. Doesn't work like that, you know. So a lot of people, I think, get scared about it because they think, well, I don't know why I'm here. I'm just not going to even bother to, you know, even look at it. You know.
So and not only knowing your purpose, but really finding that flow that leads you to your purpose. But I want to know more about your course.
Okay, so got the calling to create the Find and Follow Your Purpose course. And a lot of the people I interviewed gave me pieces of the puzzle, actually. Like, initially, I didn't want to do it because I felt too big. I didn't want to own it. It was scary. Who am I? Who's going to listen to me? What can I bring to the table? All that shit that goes around our heads, and we all have it. And, you know, I think I'm getting a little bit longer in the tooth now. So I just got to the stage where it was the obvious thing for me to do. So I needed to ignore those little voices. And, you know, there's a real parallel really with what we're talking about, because slowly but surely, by following your passions, they're like breadcrumbs to your purpose. And as you go towards them, the next piece of the puzzle is unveiled. And that's what happened to me when I was doing all the interviews. Is a culmination of my own work, the 15 years that I've done in personal development, my own study, plus the people I was interviewing were giving me the clues that I needed for the Find and Follow Your Purpose course. And then I also studied with a chap called Chris Atwood, beautiful man who has studied, he's had a meditation practice for 45 years, and he was a co-creator of the Passion Test with one of your friends, Janet Atwood. And he studied the Vedic texts around Dharma, and he gave me the final piece of the puzzle for the course that I was looking for. You know, when we tune into our soul, and when we tune into our unique gifts and talents, because, you know, Yaruna, you and I are very different. You know, what you can do, I can't do. But it's learning to understand what those gifts and talents are, and then working in alignment with them. So slowly but surely this course has kind of been unveiled to me.
I love this story, because what it's telling me as well is we are all on a journey.
Totally.
And being aware that our journey, and that every single thing that happens to us on that journey, whether it's wins or struggles or challenges or whatever it is, that it's there for a purpose. And by being aware of it and looking at it and allowing you to go listen to that little voice that is in your heart, and what I'm getting with, when you have that extra bit, that secret key, it feels to me anyway, when I'm listening to with your Do Dharma course, your key there is how to really put all of this together and look back to your own story. So you can find, well, maybe I'm on the right track.
Yes.
Or maybe I'm not on the right track.
Yeah.
And just getting that confirmation in your heart if you are on the right track, they said, hey, I'm on the right track. Yeah. And I think, I mean, you know how my thing has been about finding your X factor, and that it's already right in front of your whatever. I normally say tits, but
I think you just did.
I just did, yeah. But what I mean is what you're saying. All your story is how you do Dharma courses now. You're offering your story and listening to 80 people and their stories, and the common denominator that you've noticed in all of these stories, and that's the key that you're going to be sharing to people taking the course. I mean, I think that's freaking amazing.
Well, I hope so. But if I look at my life, you know, the amazing things, like I could never in my wildest dreams imagined how the network would turn out. Like it's incredible. It's soul family. You know, we meet twice a year. We go to amazing exotic places. We're learning, we're developing, you know, it's beyond my wildest expectation. And I think when you follow your highest excitement to the best of your ability without putting any expectation on it, this is what can happen, because we can actually limit our own, what we think is possible by our own, what we know to be the world. And so everything I've done, or everything I look at my life that is truly amazing, like meeting my husband, I knew straight away that we'd known each other for many lives before. You know, the podcast now, all the amazing things have come from when I listen to my soul and when I listen to my inner voice. And I think what I wanted to do with the Do Your Dharma course is demystify Dharma for people so they understand the concept, make it simple. Because actually when you understand it, it's a really beautiful concept. And the Do Your Dharma course is really a way of being and a way of living, and it's a life's work that we need to adopt. Like, I don't think it ever changes. Like, we're on this journey for a really long time. And so we go through the concept of Dharma, and then, you know,
love one thing that you're saying that I think is, sorry that I interrupt, I just think it's so important. And that's the thing, what you said, to learn our way of being.
Yes.
Doing.
Yes. And you see, when we're truly who we're supposed to be, when we're doing the things that come naturally to us, you know, we are in this state of bliss, you know, and it doesn't feel like work.
No, it doesn't at all.
But it's difficult because we're not taught that, are we? We're taught, go get a job, go pay the bills, you know, we're not taught as human beings from a young age to follow our highest excitement, to do the things that we really love. And so it's a real shift in path for people. So what I wanted to do with the course is to help them work out why they're here, work out what's holding them back, and effectively look at following your highest excitement as a life practice. And we give them really practical exercises about how to tune into their skills and their intuition, and how to potentially break out of the heady thinking that we get ourselves into.
The box.
The box, yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Society puts us in boxes, you know.
Yeah, it does. And we go into the boxes if we're not conscious.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're brought up in a box. You know, we're brought up from a young age to say, you know, be a good girl, good boy. Yeah. You need to behave like this. You know, if you don't behave like that.
Don't stand out. Don't give it. Yeah.
No, exactly. And then we just make ourselves miserable. So it's the course, I really think, is a mindset shift for people. It's a way of living your life differently. Yeah. And it's your life's work, but it will give the people that do it a different context to live within.
And I know from creating my own courses that this is a journey for you. And I'm curious, when you've been creating this beautiful course that I know is going to transform people's lives, because you're offering online, so it doesn't really matter where you're from, right? You can basically access the course online. What has this journey for you to step up now your game from being the host of Kitty Talks to offering an online Do Your Dharma course? What has that given you back? Just that journey alone.
My raison d'etre, my reason for being, like to go through all those years of, 10 years of my life suffering really with pain and anguish. And I like it. It's very comforting to think that there's a meaning to our lives. I don't believe we just came here to play small, to do small things. I believe we've all got a purpose. We've all got a higher mission. And our job is to tune into that mission and to become the fullest version of ourselves. And I think that's a funny thing to say, because that's like, what does that actually mean?
Yeah.
It's a bit woo-woo speak, isn't it? But what I mean, what I've learned and what I understand it to mean is finding out what really excites us, finding out the things that we enjoy, finding out the things that come naturally to us and going towards them. That's what we talk about in the course initially, is it's as simple as in any given moment doing the thing that you think, oh, that's exciting. Let's do that.
Mm-hmm. And we all know it, but we might not have, because of whatever situation or box where we put ourselves into, we might not see it. We might have a blind eye to it.
And we don't think like that. We're not brought up like that.
No.
We're taught, I was taught, go to school, get good grades, go to university, get a good job, earn good money, raise a family. And if you're not married by 30, then you're in trouble.
Another box,
and that box was painful for a while because I was not married in 30, and it's amazing.
Yeah. And it is amazing how, as well, in your case, your ideal husband came along later in life, and that was perfect for you.
Yeah. And we wouldn't have I don't think our relationship would have worked when we were younger, because we were working through, finding ourselves, really.
Exactly. And so being able to go through life at any age, no matter what it is, but with the belief in your heart that what you're doing is exactly as it should be.
Yeah, it's a much nicer way to live. So, yes, that's kind of, it feels I'm excited by the whole prospect of it, because I just feel it will give people a different frame of reference to live within.
Yeah. And Kitty, I can see that we have come to the hour. And I thank you for allowing me to be kind of like a co-host of the Kitty Talk.
You're my only co-host of Kitty Talk. It's a real privilege.
It is. I don't take that very lightly. And I'm gonna pull back and allow you to take over and be the host.
So I thank you. Well, I hope that people listening found that interesting. I had a few people ask me about my own journey, so I thought it was good timing to open up a little bit and to tell you a little bit about my journey. So thank you for listening, and stay tuned, because obviously next week we are going to return to the original format. But I would love for anyone listening to get your feedback actually on what we talked about today. What do you view? What's your kind of opinion on purpose, and does it freak you out? And I'd love to hear some of the things that come up for you when we are in this discussion. So please reach out, go to the kittytalks.com website, and you can email me through Instagram and let me know your thoughts. But yeah, thank you, Runa, so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
And we will see you next week on Kitty Talks. Bye-bye. This podcast was sponsored by my Do Your Dharma course. Create a life so good that you pinch yourself. This 8-week online course demystifies Dharma and shows you how to tune in to why you're really here. Go to www.kittytalks.com/do your Dharma.